It's no secret at this point that I've dedicated a large chunk of my life to the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. From playing all the games, to reading all the books, hours and hours spent taking in and dissecting every little bit of detail and lore there is. And throughout all that, it drew me to one conclusion. Springtrap is really cool. He's without a doubt my favorite animatronic. Not even just for all the story reasons, with him literally being the main antagonist of the whole series, but from a design aspect, I love him. He's the closest I think any of these guys have gotten to being genuinely scary on their own. Like, because most of these robots were meant to be children's entertainers, they still had to be built in a way where it made sense for them to be appealing to kids, then made scary through clever lighting and camera angles. But Springtrap is just straight up a monster. This half-man, half-machine hybrid. From the day I first bought FNAF 3 back in 2015 and became too terrified to even touch it, I knew that Springtrap was a top-tier animatronic. That whole game's atmosphere in general is just amazing in my opinion. The dreary greens and harsh electrical signs. If only the gameplay was that good. Given his immense popularity, it wasn't surprising to see them bring Springtrap back again and again over the next couple games. Getting a minor cameo in FNAF 4, his comeback being the cliffhanger for Sister Location, and from that point on it was Springtraps for everyone. Or, well, William Afton to be more specific. He was one of the two folks responsible for creating the Freddy Fazbear brand, before going crazy and killing a bunch of kids. Then their souls possessed the animatronics, came back for vengeance, William tried to hide in a golden bodysuit, it clamped shut, and so now he's fused with Springtrap. Got it? Okay, great, we'll get into more of that later. Because despite FNAF 6 having come out almost 6 years ago, and the ending giving some sort of conclusion to the Springtrap / William Afton story, he's continued to return to the series time and time again, mainly in Help Wanted, Security Breach, and was a major aspect of the Fazbear Frights books. See, I know that now because I read them. With each subsequent return, however, it seemed like the fanfare he'd received started to wane more and more. At a certain point, seeing Springtrap show up was just kinda expected and honestly old.
Say the line, Bart!
I always come back.
I surely felt this when engaging with the media. What was once my favorite animatronic has turned into a character who I think has started hindering the stories of these games, as it doesn't matter how much they try to deviate from the series' origins and take the franchise in a new direction, they always find a way to somehow have it come back to him, changing his design, turning him into a computer virus, turning him into, like an idea or something, changing his design again. At this point, people want rid of him and think he's overstayed his welcome, which I can understand and agree with. But I don't just want to focus on what went wrong with Springtrap. Instead, I want to go over why he was so interesting and effective in his first couple appearances, how they came to over-rely on him at a certain point, but also suggest how I think the character can still work in the franchise, just not in the way they've been doing. Because there have been examples of him being brought back in ways that remain smart and creative, while not feeling like we're retreading the same story beats again and again. And I'll point those out when we get there, but for now, let's start at the beginning. Here's Springtrap, a horror icon in ruin. Also, guys, my new YouTube's plushies are finally available. They both look really cool. You should buy them to help support the channel. This one has a detachable Fairly Oddparents wand, and the little mice is a cool prop for my videos and also starring in my upcoming cartoon show. Please check them out. I think they're really epic. If we sell enough, we might even be able to get the YouTube's action figure. Ooh. The plushies are only going to be available for the next 2 weeks, and then they're gone forever. So you buying them yet? To talk about Springtrap, we first have to discuss William Afton. Remember when we had no idea who or what this guy was? Countless hours of discussions and game theories trying to piece together his importance in the story? For years he was known as nothing more than the Purple Guy. Take a guess why. With his first appearance being in a FNAF 2 minigame you might see after dying. We see a packed Freddy Fazbear establishment with a crying child outside, as a man in a purple car drives up and kills them. Now, we would later, and I do mean later, get more details in the events we just saw occur, mainly that the kid was the daughter of Henry, who was the Purple Guy's partner in opening up Fredward Fazbear's, the Purple Guy doing it out of spite and jealousy for him, going mad and killing 5 more kids and stuffing them inside the suits of the animatronics, causing their souls to haunt them. It sets up the entire series. What made William Afton a cool villain to me, however, is that he was given a natural conclusion to his reign of terror at multiple points. As we see at the end of FNAF 3, William originally came back to the location where those original 5 kids died, still inside the robots, him starting to dismantle them one by one. Unbeknownst to him though, that's what released their souls from the confines of Fazbear and gang, and in fear, William jumps right back into the Golden Bunny suit he had used to lure them away and murder them all those years ago. The suit being stored in a damp, locked-off room of the restaurant, and because of its aging as well as coming in contact with so much water, the spring locks clamp shut, resulting in his death and fusing with the suit. From this point on, becoming Springtrap. What I liked so much about this ending is that it was ironic. Everything came full circle. The suit he used to cause so much pain and suffering was now causing his death, being unable to leave, sitting in that very room and continuing to rot away, until 30 years later where he's found and drudged up, becoming the center stage of a new attraction, that being Fazbear's Frights, where the events of FNAF 3 take place. This is where we'd first meet Springtrap, and what an introduction. I definitely think this is when the marketing for these things were at their peak. There was so much hype and intrigue over this next installment, all the cryptic teaser images with text that implies this animatronic will be like none other we've ever faced so far.
It's actually really creepy. There's like Golden Freddy there, and he's like...
The original string of Five Nights at Freddy's games were excellent examples of less is more, and FNAF 3 was no different. See, I always find what made the robots so scary was how they always made their moves in darkness. You rarely actually see them so much as move an inch. Of course, this was simply a restriction due to the fact that animating all of this with a one-man team would be incredibly time-consuming, but it ended up working in its favor. Rarely seeing Freddy and co moving added suspense, you waiting to see when they're gonna strike, therefore making any movement you do see all the more impactful, like Foxy lunging into the office or the prime example being the jump scare. During the FNAF 3 teaser trailer, we see Springtrap laying on the ground making spastic movements without rhyme or reason, and in 2015 this was genuinely the scariest thing I had seen from the franchise, because it wasn't something we're used to, and the game follows suit here, standing perfectly still anytime the camera is focused on him, making the occasional glitch or the moments where he's right up facing the lens way more terrifying. You never know what he's gonna do or what's going on in his head. That's where the fear factor comes from. Made even more apparent is when you do see him move at the end with the jump scare, it's super underwhelming, because of how slow it is. With them holding on the final frame way too long. What he's even doing to you not even really being conveyed very well. I mean, at least in the original game it's made clear they're getting right in your face and screaming, or in FNAF 2 they're jumping out at you, but here? Hey man, check out this cool TikTok I found.
Cheddar cheese?
FNAF jump scares in general I find have been getting worse and worse over the years, with Pizzeria Sim and Ultimate Custom Night being the absolute worst examples. Either way too slow or way too fast with no in-between, the animation loop being made as obvious as possible. I can imagine with how many characters being in the latter, it meant he couldn't spend as much time focusing on each specific one to make them as impactful as possible, so I get it, but quality over quantity, you know? I can see why Scott would want to hold on it though, so we could all appreciate this amazing design and model. It's perfect. I don't think it's been topped yet. It's got the right amount of detail without being excessive, still having that patented Scott Cawthon rough 3D charm. He's able to capture that early CGI work so well, and I don't think he does it on purpose. But it works in its favor, honestly. I love his fixed smile with rotten teeth, his eyes too being a highlight. When they're half closed, it looks like he's smiling, taking pleasure in something but you don't know what, while when they're wide open, it's like he's staring directly into your soul. Lucky for me, I don't have one of those. He's so bulky too, having such an overbearing presence. The camera angles add to this wonderfully, making him look giant like if you were in the same room as him he'd just tower over you. Not to mention him literally having a mummified corpse inside of him, being obscured just enough by the suit to let you not see how horrible the corpse model is. All of this is to say Springtrap's introduction was amazing, and it's no surprise that he quickly became a fan favorite character. It's just too bad we'll never see him reappear again, the game ending with the Fazbear Frights establishment burning down with him inside. Whoa. Springtrap was pretty absent from the next two FNAF games, 4 and Sister Location. However, Sister Location did end on the cliffhanger of Springtrap having survived that fire and coming back with a vengeance, which would then be explored and, in theory, concluded in the very next release, Five Nights at Freddy 6, also known as Pizzeria Simulator. Can't wait to see what they're gonna do with him. If it's anything like 3, then we're in for a great time. Oh yeah, that's right, Okay, so every single person ever on the internet has expressed how god-awful this design is in comparison to the original, but I feel it bears repeating. Get it? Bears. Like Chica. This is a design which the fans have dubbed Scraptrap, although I imagine at some point in the future it'll be adopted as his official name, it wouldn't be a first. But apparently the story reason for this is that upon being burned in the Fazbear Frights attraction, William would start to repair his suit, resulting in a different appearance, and honestly, while this reason makes the most sense, I still don't exactly think it's satisfying at all. Like, repairing is one thing, but the guy completely changed the design of the head. I can't imagine he was sitting there like, alright, I'll repair it, but this time, I want to give myself a funny little rabbit snout. Or adding on mascot feet when the original Springtrap had none. Where did he get these parts? How did he learn to do this with such meticulous detail? To me, Springtrap always seemed like he was on the brink of falling apart. Like one wrong move would cause the spring locks to clamp even further and kill him for good. So I find it hard to believe he managed to make all these major repairs to himself after being burned in a fire, especially considering, oh I don't know, he lost one of his arms? The guy was doing this shit one-handed. Another aspect of this is the whole remnant thing, which started to become introduced to the series with Sister Location, being this substance that can trap souls inside of inanimate objects, explaining how William always manages to come back. It doesn't matter if his body is dead, he's directly tied to the suit now, which I guess also explains why he doesn't just jump out of it and find a new body. I sometimes see folks say that Springtrap looks so different because William got into a different mascot suit, but that just doesn't seem to work with how the series describes Remnant. And again, it would make me question why after finally getting out of the suit, he just finds himself a new one to inhabit. Like, William's son Michael also got infused with Remnant, which leaves him as an animated corpse after Ennard leaves him at the end of Sister Location, but he at the very least can walk around town despite his appearance. Can't imagine Springtrap managing to get into his local Sainsbury's for a packet of crisps. It's no surprise to anyone, but Springtrap is just a fundamentally worse design. Springtrap looks scary in the dark, but still pretty menacing when brightened up. Springtrap only starts to look scary in the dark, as a result of his giant metal eyes being obscured. Again, it's that less is more thing. Him having this weird design can work, but his mouth and mainly his eyes causes you to get too much emotion out of him. It'd be better if I couldn't tell what he was thinking, because otherwise we have renders like this where he just looks stoned out of his mind. Another aspect I'm torn upon is how much of William Afton should still be considered human. With FNAF 6, they start leaning into his human side, not the part of him that's overrun by animatronic. Him being fully conscious of his surroundings and even speaking multiple threatening sentences, showing that he knew being called to the new pizza establishment was a trick, but he's fascinated by what's come of the other animatronics you salvage.
What a deceptive calling. I knew it was a lie the moment I heard it, obviously, but it is intriguing nonetheless.
See, I'm pretty torn on this concept. The original novel trilogy even shows that he likes being Springtrap. I'm mixed about it because I can see why it works, but also why I think it makes him less scary. It makes sense because in the novels they elaborate more on what he wants, why he's doing all this, being because he fears death more than anything, even using the dead kids to experiment on ways to transfer his remnant to a new robot so he can live even longer. So to him, being in the Spring Bonnie suit is him cheating death, so it makes sense why he'd like it. But at the same time, it's kind of dumb. Not to mention something that isn't really shown to us explicitly in the games themselves. You know, I'd argue I shouldn't have to read books to see what our main antagonist's motivation is. But I don't know, I also just like the idea that in FNAF 3 he was mindless. No goal in mind other than just killing whatever was around, that being you. It's more simple, I'm aware, and you obviously couldn't build a recurring bad guy around him just wanting to kill without it getting steel after a while. But I guess it's mainly because of how jarring the shift was. Why wasn't he talking at all in FNAF 3? For the spooky? It just seems like Scott wanted to bring him back, knew he had to do something more to justify it, and therefore made him more William than Springtrap. Either way, despite all that, I still enjoy the ending they give him in FNAF 6. It being revealed to us that Henry was the person who called all the animatronics to the pizzeria, so he could burn them inside once and for all, freeing the children's spirits and sending William Afton straight to hell. For a series that's infamous for being so complicated and cryptic, it was refreshing to see this one end with a satisfying conclusion, answering a lot of the questions that had been building up for years, and putting an end to what William Afton started decades before. So then they brought him back. The next time we'd see any trace of William in another official game would be the next game. The VR experience Help Wanted. Despite being a collection of remakes of the original few games with some more thrown in, it featured its own plot which appeared to be taking the franchise in a new direction, but for some reason they felt like still trying to involve William Afton in some way. There's this character you can see occasionally inside the main hub area called Malhair or Glitchtrap. Again, the naming schemes for these guys aren't always obvious. Initially, you think this is going to be setting up a new villain for the series to focus on. Perfect! He's got a great design too, clearly being a guy in a suit instead of the animatronics we've gotten so used to seeing at this point. Wonderful. As the game progresses, we can collect tapes that when put together show you that there's much more going on behind the scenes of this seemingly innocent minigame collection. We hear of a female playtester who started noticing this strange being inside the game.
Psst, it's Glitchtrap.
She then says that she split up his code in her 16 different cassette tapes, and to not put them together. But then after a certain point completely shifts, telling you to put them in order and giving instructions on how to destroy it. You later find out that this was a trap, that you putting the tapes back together was in fact putting him back together too, that the playtester was taken over by the glitch trap near the end of her audio logs, and the person talking to you was this bizarre entity making you free them. Interestingly though, it didn't fully take over the woman, almost just creating this voice inside her head. Huh. But, okay, what does this have to do with William Afton or Springtrap? Isn't he in hell right now? Or is this related? How could this possibly— oh. Yeah, so while this isn't exactly the William Afton we've been seeing throughout all the games, it is some bizarre digital manifestation of him that's corrupted some data. How did this manage to happen?
Shut up!
I actually don't mind this that much. Sure, I'd rather him stay dead and have them move on, but Help Wanted at the very least seems like it wanted to take this in a new direction, with a secret room setting up an entirely new villain, this strange white rabbit. We later find out in Security Breach that this is Vanny, who is roaming the Pizzaplex in search of Gregory, presumably to kill him. That game is extremely poor at setting up threats though, like there's this security guard called Vanessa, who you think would be a good thing for a kid to find in a mall filled with bugged out animatronics. But he tells Freddy that she's trying to get him, so that's that, I suppose. Like, I get what's going on here, but the game never actually gives us that reveal, setting up why Vanessa is that threat. It never properly takes the time to establish Vanessa as a threat. So some rando jumping in at this game is gonna be confused as hell as to why they have to avoid the security guard so much. Wait a minute. Vanny? Vanessa? Vanny? Vanessa. Vanny? Vanessa. Wait, you don't think— I can't believe this was something people had to genuinely theorize about. Anyways, Vanessa is a really good concept for a FNAF villain, in that they were able to still have William Afton be involved without literally needing to have William Afton. Again, I'd like to put focus on the word concept for a villain. Vanessa is heavily implied to be the playtester from Help Wanted, not having gone crazy with the voice of William stuck in her head, convincing her to do what she eventually does in Security Breach. I like this idea a lot, it's like the cult of Springtrap, you know? Someone who was influenced by William Afton to take up his mantle and continue where he had left off. Now let's see where they messed up with this. Like I said before, the entirety of Security Breach feels like them trying to take Five Nights at Freddy's in a whole new direction. New location, new animatronics, a different vibe entirely with all new enemies to boot. Only for them to do a U-turn at the last minute and make William Afton the main antagonist once again. Yeah, no, so by the end of the game you wind up falling underneath the Pizzaplex, where you're greeted with the pizzeria from FNAF 6, the one where Scraptrap was burned and left in. And given the dialogue spoken by Glamrock Freddy, it's implied that Vanessa took him down there before to dig up the remains of William Afton, putting him inside of a recharge station to revive him. So now he's brought back in as the final boss, now being referred to as Burntrap? How many of you did it take to come up with that one? Bringing William back here came off like a slap in the face to everything the franchise had seemingly been building towards. That being something new. And most importantly, completely ruins the ending to FNAF 6, which was a perfect conclusion to his story. But nope, now he's just alive again. Sorry Henry, looks like your plan failed. Whoops. Since Remnant is a thing, I guess that means they can bring him back as many times as they want. He does always come back. It could have worked too, that's what's so weird about it. But evidently, whatever they had planned to do with him was stripped more and more as the game was rushed to release, clearly being half finished with many animations in the files, suggesting that Burntrap was going to do a lot more than just stand still for the final boss. Like I said, I like the idea of Vanny being some sort of disciple to William Afton, following in his footsteps, and while I'm sure this is what they wanted to go for, the game should have made more of an effort to build up to the idea that Vanny was doing all of this to resurrect him, instead of making some half-assed attempt to shoehorn that into the last minute on one of the optional endings. In general, I think a better approach to all of this should have been about the idolization of Springtrap, not the corruption of Vanessa's mind. Like I said, the cult of William Afton is a genuinely cool idea. Wouldn't be a stretch either. Look at all the people idolizing folks like Jeffrey Dahmer, which saw a resurgence with that new Netflix show. It could make sense that some crazy lady would become so obsessed with William and therefore want to find a way to revive him using Remnant, or at least carry on continuing his legacy. But then that goes into the whole debate of how much of the Five Nights at Freddy's series should remain grounded versus how much it should dabble in sci-fi. I can see the pros and cons to both sides. Of course, being a franchise revolving around animatronics being possessed by dead kids means there's always going to be that unrealistic angle to it. But other than that, the games remain fairly grounded. It wasn't until Sister Location in the novels where we started getting into Remnant and illusion discs and whatnot. I feel a more realistic angle is scarier, but the sci-fi angle allows for more varied concepts. Really though, do what you want, FNAF, I don't really care as long as it's good. I'm not sure how popular of a take this is, but literally like 2 days ago I found out about this popular FNAF fan game called The Glitched Attraction, and by find out about, I mean I watched the Markiplier playthrough. It's this really neat fan game where you're lured to a Five Nights at Freddy's escape room. As you go on, it's made clear that Vanny is the one behind all this, creating the attraction using illusion discs. In reality, all the animatronics you see are mere endoskeletons, seen by Springtrap's death where he reverts back to one. By the end, when you find all this stuff out, you're knocked out by Vanny, only to wake up and see that your remnant is being injected out of you. This is so they can put it on endoskeletons, so they can replace you and therefore lure more friends into the place for the cycle to repeat. Them also using the remnant for William's recharge station. As far as I'm aware, I only watched the playthrough once, maybe there's more I'm missing here, but point being, here's a perfectly solid attempt at making Springtrap's return more natural with a build-up and payoff. But in Security Breach, what's his goal? What does he want? At this point, all his original possessed robots are gone. The Fazbear brand is something completely different, and it's just him and this lunatic woman. What are his goals? To kill? That's a bit boring. And you can clearly come out and say, well actually, if you read the Five Nights at Freddy's encyclopedia on page 4223, they clearly state that. Like, no, if the FNAF series wants to do bigger AAA games, then I expect them to have the stories of such. They don't get away with having less substance than the 30-minute point-and-click survival games. I can't help but feel that Springtrap himself is just kind of boring and lame now. Not an original thought, I'm aware, but even in the way he looks, it's such a downgrade. He looks like a baby Fisher-Price version of Springtrap, not something seriously designed to be scary. Although I guess at this point you can say that about the franchise as a whole. But he just looks pathetic. The guy's been beaten and spring-locked and burnt down and then burnt down again, that I have to wonder what the threat of him even is anymore. That he killed a bunch of kids 40 years ago and has done nothing but feel since? Ugh, scary. Like, look at him at this point. Like, if I pointed at him the wrong way, he'd fall apart. He's hanging on by a thread, and it definitely doesn't add to the intimidation his character used to evoke. If I could be positive for a moment, I actually don't mind the way the Fazbear Frights novels tried bringing back William Afton. Although if they were to adopt this into the games in some way, it would be a nightmare, trust me. From experiencing all those things, they're a mess. A fun mess, but a mess nonetheless. They more so focus on the idea of William's legacy, like legacy being an actual thing, the memories others have of you and what emotions that evokes from them. In those books, he comes into play by the end as this giant amalgamation, but it's not really him. His soul is trying to once again regain power by the memories people still have of him, his legacy. That is a grossly oversimplified version of all that, so if you want to see a full recap, then go check out my books video. It's pretty sweet, IMO. But my point is, if they want to keep bringing back William, then this is a better way to do it than literally just having him come back as a remnant zombie. Have him be kept alive through his memory and the fear his name strikes in people. So really, all this is to say, the Five Nights at Freddy's series desperately needs more villains. Every time you think they're taking a step in the right direction, they immediately take 2 steps back, falling on what's already worked in the past, which I understand, especially given how they do attempt to do new things with him every time. But at a certain point, so much is piled onto him that I can't help but feel like he's lost some of what made him special from his first appearance in FNAF 2. That he was just some creepy guy who went crazy and killed a bunch of kids. I like William Afton, and I especially like Springtrap. But you have to learn when to let a good thing die, or else you continue to risk his legacy being tarnished further and further. I think the overwhelmingly negative reception towards his inclusion at the end of Security Breach will have influence in the next project. Well, maybe not the Ruins DLC, but whatever comes after. If anything, I could see them using said DLC as a way to go back and fix what went wrong with that initial ending, hopefully making yet another satisfying end to his character. But even if that doesn't happen and they continue to milk Springtrap and William Afton for all he's worth, I'll always remember those initial few entries. How terrified he made me as a 13-year-old playing FNAF 3, how cool that ending to Pizzeria Simulator is. Springtrap will always hold a special place in my heart no matter what. Okay, get mad at them for bringing back Springtrap all you want, but without it we wouldn't have got the phenomenal appearance of Tie-Dye Springtrap.